The alarm on my wrist buzzed twice, which meant one thing on this station: trouble in the royal wing. I dropped my mop and ran before I even understood why a janitor was being called to a security alert. My name is Owen Marsh, and 3 weeks ago, I was the only person willing to clean the nursery where the Vorthal children were kept. Everyone else on this station called that wing cursed. I called it a paycheck. Now I was sprinting down a corridor with my heart hammering, because the voice on my comm had said the word intruders, and the only people I cared about on this whole station were locked behind that door. The door hissed open under my palm print, and what I saw stopped me cold. The lights were cut. 4 small shapes were pressed into the corner of the room, shaking, their pale blue skin flickering with the frightened light patterns that meant danger. And standing in the middle of the room were 2 men in dark suits who did not belong on this station at all. I did not think. I threw my mop bucket at the nearest one and screamed for the children to get behind me. That single moment is where this story really begins. But to understand how a janitor ended up standing between armed strangers and the last children of a dead alien queen, you have to go back 3 weeks, to the day nobody else wanted this job. The station was called Meridian 9, a neutral outpost sitting between 3 warring systems, built for diplomacy and quiet business. When the Vorthal Empire collapsed after a violent coup, the Queen Mother sent her youngest Clutch away in secret, entrusting them to Meridian 9 for protection, while the Empire sorted out its future. 4 children survived the escape, their mother did not. I did not know any of this history when my supervisor, a tired man named Gareth Doyle, called me into his office and told me I had a new assignment. "The royal wing needs a cleaner," he said, not looking up from his tablet. "Nobody else will take it." "Why not?" I asked. "Because the last 3 people who tried got hurt," he said. "The little ones panic. When they panic, they release some kind of toxin through their skin. Doesn't kill you, but it will put you in the medical bay for a week, shaking and unable to move. Security won't even go in there without full suits anymore." I needed the extra pay that hazard duty offered, more than I needed comfort, so I said yes without thinking too hard about it. The next morning, I stood outside the nursery door with a cart full of cleaning supplies and a stomach full of nerves. The door opened, and the smell hit me first. Something like ozone and rain. The room beyond was dim, kept that way on purpose, and in the shadows near the far wall, I saw 4 small shapes huddled together, watching me with wide, glowing eyes. I had expected monsters. What I found were children. They looked nothing like human kids, of course. Their skin was a soft blue-gray, smooth like river stone, and thin ridges ran down their backs like the spine of a book. Their eyes were too large for their faces, dark and liquid, the kind of eyes that seemed to hold every bit of fear they were feeling. The smallest one could not have been taller than my knee, the oldest, maybe up to my waist. I did not walk toward them. I had read enough of the warning file that Gareth gave me to know better. Instead, I set my cart down near the door and started cleaning the corner nearest to me, humming an old tune under my breath, the kind of song my grandmother used to hum while she worked in her garden. I did not look at them. I did not speak to them. I just worked, slow and steady, letting the quiet stretch out until it did not feel like a threat anymore. It took almost an hour before I noticed the smallest one had crept a few steps closer, watching me from behind a support pillar. I kept humming. I kept mopping. I did not turn my head. That was the first day. Nothing dramatic happened. I finished my shift, packed my cart, and left without a single word exchanged. But something had shifted, even if I did not understand it yet. The second day, I brought a small lamp with me, one I had built myself out of spare parts from the maintenance bay. I had spent my evening researching the Vorthal homeworld, learning that their planet had 2 moons that hung low and silver in the night sky, and that young Vorthal found comfort in that kind of soft, twin light. The lamp was a rough approximation, nothing fancy, just 2 glowing orbs on a stand, but when I set it in the corner of the room and switched it on, all 4 children went completely still. The oldest one, who I would later learn was named Kessa by the caretakers who first logged her, took one careful step out of the shadows. Her skin shifted color, the frightened blue fading into something calmer, a soft violet. I did not push my luck. I finished cleaning and left the lamp behind when my shift ended. The days that followed became a quiet rhythm. I cleaned, I hummed. I left small things behind. A puzzle cube one day, a piece of fruit from my own lunch tray the next, always placed near the door where they could choose to approach or ignore it. I never touched them. I never demanded anything from them. I simply showed up, every single day, calm and unthreatening, and let them decide for themselves whether I was safe. By the end of the first week, the smallest one, whose name turned out to be Pell, had taken to following 2 steps behind me as I worked, close enough to watch, far enough to run if he needed to. By the second week, Kessa had started speaking to me in careful, halting words she had picked up from the station's translation devices left in their room. "Why do you not fear us?" she asked me one afternoon, her large eyes studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Should I?" I asked back. "Everyone else does," she said. "They wear the thick suits. They do not look at us. They leave as fast as they can." I set down my cloth and crouched low, so I was closer to her eye level, though still careful to keep some distance. "I think everyone is just scared of what they don't understand," I told her. "I don't understand you either. Not really. But I figure the best way to learn is to just keep showing up." She did not answer, but that evening, when I finished my shift, all 4 of them had gathered near the doorway to watch me leave. It was such a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something important. Over the following days, I learned each of their names and something of their personalities. Pell was the youngest and the most curious, always the first to sniff at a new object I brought in, though also the quickest to bolt back to the group if startled. There was a pair of siblings, Doran and Vex, who never seemed to leave each other's side, communicating in soft chirps that the translation devices could barely keep up with. And Kessa, the oldest, carried herself with a quiet weight that seemed far too heavy for a child, like she understood exactly what her family had lost and felt responsible for the others because of it. I never asked them directly about their mother. I did not need to. I could see it in the way Kessa flinched whenever an unfamiliar voice came over the station announcements, the way all 4 of them slept in a tight pile in the corner farthest from the door, as if being close together was the only thing keeping the fear away. One evening, about 2 weeks into my new assignment, Kessa asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Will you leave us too?" she asked. "Everyone else who comes here leaves eventually." I thought about it for a long moment before answering, because I did not want to make a promise I could not keep. "I don't know what happens with your family in the future," I told her honestly, "but as long as I have a say in it, I'll keep showing up, every day. That's the only promise I can make you." She studied me for a long time after that, her skin cycling slowly through shades of blue and violet, and then, for the first time since I had met her, she reached out and touched my sleeve, just for a second, before pulling her hand back, like she had surprised even herself. It does not sound like much, written down like this, but in that moment, I felt something settle in my chest that I had not expected to feel toward 4 alien children I had only known for 2 weeks. I felt responsible for them, not because it was my job, but because somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing them as a hazard duty assignment and started seeing them as kids who needed someone steady in their lives. That steadiness was about to be tested in a way I never could have prepared for. It happened on a day that started like any other. I arrived at the nursery wing with my cart, badged through the door, and found the children waiting for me near the entrance, which had become their habit by then. Pell chirped a greeting. Doran and Vex were tangled together near the twin moon lamp, which had become a permanent fixture in the room. Kessa gave me the small nod she always did, the one that had slowly replaced her old habit of shrinking away from every new presence. I had no idea that somewhere else on the station, 2 men had just badged through a service entrance, using stolen credentials, carrying weapons disguised as maintenance tools, and that they were headed directly for this room. The first sign of trouble was the lights. They flickered once, then dropped to almost nothing, the station's emergency systems clearly struggling with something. My comm buzzed against my wrist, a warning alert I had never seen before. Station-wide lockdown initiated. Unauthorized access detected in secure sections. Kessa's skin went pale blue immediately, the color of pure fear. Pell darted behind her, and Doran and Vex pressed themselves flat against the wall. I moved without thinking, pulling my cart in front of the door as a makeshift barrier, though I knew it would not stop anyone determined to get through. My mind was racing, trying to remember every maintenance tunnel and access panel I had memorized over years of working this station, because if there was one thing a janitor knew better than security ever could, it was the hidden bones of a place like this. "There," I said quietly, pointing to a panel low on the far wall that led into the ventilation access. "That leads to the maintenance corridors. I know every turn in there. If something happens, that is where we go." Kessa looked at the panel, then at me, and I saw something shift in her expression, a decision being made. "We trust you," she said simply. The door alarm blared a moment later, the kind of sound that meant someone was trying to force an override on the lock. I did not wait to see who it was. I pulled the access panel open and started ushering the children through, Pell first, small enough to slip through easily, then Doran and Vex together, refusing to be separated even for a moment. Kessa hesitated at the opening, looking back at me. "Go," I told her. "I'm right behind you." The door gave way just as I pushed the panel shut behind us, sealing it as best I could with a maintenance override code I had no real authority to use, but desperate situations made rule breakers of all of us. The tunnel beyond was cramped, lit only by the dim emergency strips along the floor, but I knew this space the way most people know the layout of their own home. I had spent years crawling through these corridors fixing broken systems, and now that knowledge was the only thing standing between 4 terrified children and whoever had just broken into their nursery. We moved quickly, the children following close behind me, their small chirps of fear echoing softly off the metal walls. I could hear muffled voices behind us, the sound of the panel being forced open, and I knew we did not have much time. "There is a maintenance hub 2 levels down," I whispered to Kessa, who had moved up to walk beside me, her earlier fear replaced by a kind of steady focus that reminded me painfully of how a much older person might carry themselves in a crisis. "It connects to the security office. If we can get there, we can get real help." She nodded, translating quickly to the others in their own soft language, and we pressed on. The tunnel forced us through a narrow vertical shaft, and I had to lift Pell through it myself, his small clawed hands gripping my shoulder tightly as I hauled us both up. Doran and Vex managed it together, moving with a coordination that suggested they had done far more difficult things together in their short lives than I wanted to think about. Kessa climbed last, refusing my offered hand, determined to manage on her own, even in the middle of danger. We had almost reached the maintenance hub when I heard footsteps behind us in the tunnel, too heavy and too deliberate to be station staff. Someone had found the access panel and was following our path. I pushed the children ahead of me toward the hub entrance, a wide junction room filled with humming machinery and the comforting hum of the station's environmental systems. "I is not much of a fighter," I told them honestly, my voice low and steady despite the pounding in my chest. "But I am not leaving any of you." Kessa grabbed my sleeve, the same gesture she had made weeks earlier, except this time she did not pull away. "We are not leaving you either," she said. The footsteps grew closer, and I positioned myself between the tunnel entrance and the children, grabbing the heaviest tool from my belt, an old pipe wrench that had fixed more broken valves than I could count, and was about to serve a very different purpose. A shape appeared in the tunnel mouth, and for one terrible second I thought this was the end of whatever small, strange family I had built over the last 3 weeks. But then I saw the uniform, the familiar deep green of Meridian 9 security, and behind that first officer came a dozen more, moving fast and calling out clear commands. "It's the janitor," someone shouted. "He's got the children, they're safe." The relief that flooded through me was so sudden it nearly buckled my knees. A woman named Priya Nair, the station's head of security, pushed forward through the crowd of officers, her eyes scanning the children behind me with visible relief. "We caught the 2 intruders near the nursery," she told me quickly. "Coop loyalists from the Vorthal homeworld, tracking the royal line. Your override code in that access panel actually helped us pin down exactly where you'd gone. Smart thinking. Using the maintenance tunnels." I did not feel smart in that moment. I felt like my hands were shaking, and my legs might give out any second. But when I turned around and saw all 4 children staring up at me, their skin cycling slowly back to calmer colors, I understood that none of that mattered. They were safe. That was the only thing that had mattered from the very first moment I threw that mop bucket, or rather, from the moment I had started leaving small gifts by a nursery door 3 weeks earlier, hoping 4 frightened children might someday trust me. The days after the incident brought changes I had not expected. Station officials wanted to interview me for hours. Security wanted a full report on every tunnel and access point I had used, and even the diplomatic corps got involved, sending careful messages back to what remained of the Vorthal Royal Court about the events on Meridian 9. A representative of the Vorthal Advisory Council arrived nearly a week later, a tall, dignified figure named Ambassador Terrell, who requested to meet with me personally in the same nursery room where everything had begun. "You saved the last of the royal line," he told me, his translated voice carrying a weight of formality I was not used to. "The council wishes to offer you whatever reward is within our power to give. Wealth, rank, a place among our advisors, should you wish to relocate to the rebuilding court." I looked past him at the 4 children, who were watching this exchange with wide, curious eyes from their usual corner of the room, the twin moon lamp glowing softly behind them. "I don't need any of that," I told him honestly. "I just want to keep doing my job. Keep cleaning this room. Keep showing up every day, same as before." The ambassador seemed genuinely surprised by that answer, glancing between me and the children as if trying to understand something he had not expected to find on a neutral trading station. Kessa spoke up before he could respond, her voice steady in a way it had not been 3 weeks earlier. "He is not just the one who cleans," she told the ambassador firmly. "He is the reason we are still here. If he wishes to stay, then he stays." The ambassador studied her for a long moment, then bowed his head slightly, a gesture I later learned was reserved for matters the royal line considered settled beyond discussion. "Then it will be so," he said simply. Life on Meridian 9 did not return to what it had been before, not really, but it settled into something new, something better than I think anyone expected. I kept my job in the nursery wing, though my duties expanded far beyond mopping floors. I learned more of the Vorthal language, enough to speak with the children directly, instead of relying on translation devices. I brought new lamps, new small comforts, and slowly watched a room that had once felt like a cage of fear turn into something closer to a real home. Pell, still the smallest and most curious, took to following me on my rounds through other parts of the station whenever security allowed it, chirping happily at every new machine or corridor we passed. Doran and Vex grew bold enough to leave the nursery walls entirely, exploring the station's small garden dome under careful supervision, their skin flashing bright, delighted colors at the sight of real growing plants. And Kessa, who had once carried the weight of her family's survival like a stone around her neck, began to laugh, quietly at first, then more freely, as the weeks turned into months. Every morning, without fail, I would arrive at the nursery door with my cart of supplies, and every morning, without fail, all 4 of them would be waiting just inside, watching the door with those large, expressive eyes until it slid open and I stepped through. Some people on the station still call it the strangest assignment anyone has ever taken. A janitor, trusted with the last children of an alien empire, closer to them than any trained diplomat or guard ever managed to become. But I never saw it as strange. I think, in the end, it came down to something simple. Everyone else who walked into that room saw danger first and children second. I walked in and saw children who were scared, who needed someone patient enough to let trust grow in its own time, without forcing it, without demanding it, just showing up, day after day, until fear turned into something else entirely. That is the whole of it, really. Not a story about heroes or titles or rewards, though I suppose those things found their way into it eventually. Just a story about 4 frightened children, and the one person on an entire station who was willing to keep showing up until they stopped being afraid. And every single morning, when that nursery door slides open, and I hear 4 small voices call out my name, I know I made the right choice. All those weeks ago, when everyone else said no, and I said yes.